welcome to TechRaptor. We are here today with a little special roundtable discussion. We've all had a chance to watch the first episode of the hotly anticipated Yakuza Like a Dragon TV show released now on Prime Video. Before we dive into the show itself, I do want to set some ground rules. We're only going to discuss episode 1. We're going to keep it, mostly spoiler free. And kind of to get really into it, I would love to hear from you three, my lovely guests. If you could have a chance to introduce yourself and let me know what experience you have with the Yakuza franchise.
Oh. Yeah. You want to go first, Andrew?
Sure. It's Andrew Rodden, editor-in-chief at TechRaptor. I've played Yakuza 1 and 2 and 0, and I'm on 3, and I've played some 7. So I've played quite a few of them. Not everything.
Yeah.
But I know a little bit of Yakuza.
Mm-hmm. I'm Robert Scarpanito, features editor. I've played a bit of 1 and a bit of 2, Kiwami for both, and a little bit of 0, and then finished 6, 7, and 8, and the man who erased his name, and all the Judgment games so far. But I'm also not a person who needs to finish things sequentially. That's just not how I'm wired. Most people hate me for that.
It's fucked up, actually. It's pretty fucked up.
Yeah, so my first one was Yakuza 6. That's the one I finished. I started at the end of Kiryu's story. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
And I'm Erren Van Dyne. I'm a staff writer at TechRaptor. So I probably played the least out of all these guys. I played the original 1 and 2 on the PlayStation 2, I think it was, way back when they originally came out, and I had no idea what they were. And I only played a few hours in each of them, so not very much. But I do actually own all of the ones that they've released since then. I just haven't played them.
An aspiring Yakuza fan.
Right, yeah. Adding to the backlog, right?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So
what about you, Stretch?
Yeah. Me, yeah. I have managed to successfully play the first 3 or 4 hours of 0 and Like a Dragon.
The seventh one.
So the one with
Yeah, the first one with Ichiban.
Yeah,
yeah, that's my whole experience. That and memes, right. I feel like
it's an internet juggernaut, Yakuza.
So going into the show, again, kind of roundtable. I think I'm maybe speaking for everyone here, but I think that none of us went into this with the greatest expectation after news came out that writers for the show were told to not research the source material. This season is meant to be a recreation of the first game. I guess for someone who's probably experienced the most of this story, Otten, what expectations did you have? What hopes, what fears did you have coming into this?
Mostly trepidation, because there's Yakuza's got an insane tone that kind of shouldn't work. It's so whiplashy, from extremely serious mob story to a naked man in his underwear trying to sell porn, or you're stealing porn for a child. Yeah. There's just the tonal shift is just totally far off from each other. So I was like, I don't know how they're gonna get that fuck aroundness with the there actually is some serious shit going down. That Kiryu is the coolest guy in the world to solve. So I'm not surprised that they've gone more of we're just gonna stick to the seriousness. Because it'd be super hard to how do you do that in a TV show? There's a little more latitude in a game because I'm doing whatever, and we're used to there being weird stuff around, and it just kind of works as you run around the world exploring stuff. Because you could also not do any of the weird stuff and just do the main story if you want to. That's insane. If anybody told me that's how they played Yakuza, I'd be like, you're doing it wrong. But But yeah, I knew it was going to be impossible to nail it in some way. So they kind of had to make a choice. So we're going to lean into the weird or we're going to lean into the serious. And they went with the serious.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's something I was thinking about as I finished the first episode. I was like, man, I am curious about how the tone is going to hit me. And it made me think a lot about how the video game's tone, right? Like you said, it's wacky and serious. And I think the core part of it is that you consent to all sides of that equation, right? Like you walk up to the naked baby man adult and choose
himself everywhere and dancing weird.
You choose to talk to him and you consent to going on this quest.
True.
Right. I think with the TV show, there isn't that much like you can't really consent to a tonal whiplash in a show. Like you just choose to watch the show and then it happens to you. And I don't know how well that tonal whiplash would land in like a tight 40-minute package, you know?
Yeah.
Erren, do you agree with the trepidations coming in, or?
Yeah, and I did read that article as well, and my first thought was, well, that can either be a good thing or a bad thing because we have seen video game adaptations that aren't very good, uh, but there are some good ones that kind of deviate from the source material, like Fallout doesn't really follow one of the games exactly, right? So I thought, maybe this what they're doing here and not following the game exactly could be a good thing. And so I was willing to at least give it a chance in that respect.
Yeah.
And I know that the kind of the Yakuza that we know nowadays, where a pirate show, like a pirate game, gets announced and everyone just nods and says, well, of course there's a pirate game.
Yes.
For those who did play the original, was there was there as much mucking about, as much weirdness going on then that has then flanderized itself? Or even back in like the root game, was there still this idea, like has our perception of what Yakuza is now as a franchise, you think, made us look to this very serious Yakuza show and say, like, that's not my Yakuza?
Hashtag not my Yakuza.
Yeah, get it trending.
Hashtag not my Kiryu. Not my Kiryu-chan. From what I remember of playing the original, it does start off pretty serious because it does need to it's the starting point, right? It does need to establish okay, here's the stakes. Here's why Kiryu goes to jail for 10 years. Spoiler alert, if you didn't know that, that's a thing. And so there are a lot of like more machismo, serious melodrama stakes off at the start. I don't quite remember how much it gets into the wackiness or how soon it does though in Yakuza 1.
When you get thrown into Kamurocho and stuff, like going around, because it's also like Kiryu's like, all right, what's the world like? I've been gone a while, and what the hell is this? This is all weird. So he's constantly getting into stuff. That's what the great thing about Yakuza is, and what's gonna be hard for the show is it's so from Kiryu's point of view, because like he'll just see something interesting happen in front of him, and it's like, all right, I'll soak that in. And now we're moving on. Like he'll make his comment and he's like, all right, dude, you do you. And then he walks away and it's like, all right. Not having that so far. Obviously, who knows where the show goes. But I think that wackiness has always kind of been there. Maybe gotten more over the top. We didn't have like casino boats or anything.
or fucking Animal Crossing.
Yeah, or Pokemon.
Or Pokemon, yeah.
But so those definitely get more elaborate, but it's always that tonal stuff has been there as far as I can remember.
Yeah, I think if anything, they've just kind of ratcheted up the amount of like mini games and weird stuff, like game within a game, like Virtua Fighter, and things like that, putting it in there. So it's always kind of be there. And the other thing is, like even just like the base combat system in the first game, I always thought was kind of, a little exaggerated for a beat 'em up, and that's kind of always been there as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the heat actions have always been like, oh, we're just killing people in like wildest ways. But Kiryu never kills.
Never. He's Batman.
He's like, yeah.
Never.
So telling the story of Kiryu, the idea of, how he was 10 years ago to the, quote unquote present day. The TV show tells it in quite an interesting way by consistently rolling back, introducing you to characters and premises. Do you guys think that it's an efficient way to deliver this plot by piecemealing you through two different timelines?
That was actually one of the things I was going to bring up because I don't think it's really like that. I don't remember it being that way in the game, at least in the beginning. So that they're already kind of splicing in his past and, focusing on the time when he was a child. I feel like that they've added that to try and get the viewer to connect with him as a character, which is, it's harder to do sometimes in video games that were made, during the PS2 era. That wasn't always like something that they were focused on. So to sell the story to a TV audience, I think that's definitely something that they wanted to do.
Yeah, it was. I was very curious when I was watching those moments specifically. I was like, I wonder how this is going for someone that knows nothing about Yakuza, like taking in this information. Because I was like, oh, I know what they're telling me about because I already know it. No, but I was kind of thinking, I was like, does it really get it across all that well? Or how cool would it have been if you see Kiryu, it starts with Kiryu out of jail, of him experiencing Kamurocho himself and confronting his past where those revelations come with you. Because that's what the game does, essentially. You learn more about those people and you're like, oh shit, that's a moment where you learn a little something about Kiryu in the past. You're like, this is why this guy's a big deal or whatever. But I guess if they are just wanting to set up, it's because it seems like a bigger show where it's not like Kiryu's obviously going to be the main character, the main dude, but they're showing you so many other things. I wonder if we're going to see a lot more POVs from other people. Because part of what made me think about this, I had a little moment is when the title credits, the main title thing started going. I was like, oh, this is like Game of Thrones. And like they're doing some like very fancy thing. This is not the Yakuza I would have thought of. It didn't need this super serious dragon thing going everywhere.
I don't get how they didn't have it being like a karaoke cover
that would be so good
for the intro.
Yeah. So, like a Peacemaker.
Yeah.
Dance number.
That's the crossover I want, like a Peacemaker.
Yes. So good. Dude, he would fit perfectly. He wouldn't stand out.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Auden, you bring up an incredible point there for someone who doesn't know the story. How is that like? Let me tell you, I was fucking lost. Like, I knew some of the main characters. I knew some of the, like little bits and pieces of what was going on from my brief experience with Zero. But yeah, the at least I've watched further, and it kind of you do end up picking up more, and it does retroactively make things make more sense. I will say, to get people in on the ground level with the first episode, it was definitely not great. And kind of what added to this as well was some of the interesting decisions that they had with the subtitles. That there was a lot of, I love anime, read subtitles all the time. That's no problem. They did a whole lot of throwing in the Japanese term for something in the subtitle without correctly building up the context required. There's one point where Kiryu's getting scolded, and this very impressive character that clearly has a massive backstory that you don't know anything about says to Kiryu, you know nothing about the Gokudo or the dragon. And with no context, it's like, okay, well, now I've got to pause this to quickly look up what Gokudo means, only to learn that it's just another word for Yakuza. That it feels like
Goku's Yakuza?
Yeah.
Oh.
Kiryu is just Suit Goku. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Oh, I knew that already. Every Japanese property has its own Goku. It's just
But there are a number of times that the subtitles continue to do it, and it did get to a point where I was just like, well, I'm just not going to bother looking it up. I'm just going to smile and wave and nod and like.
I guess I hadn't thought about that terminology and
through.
even just names. They throw a lot of names at you very fast because it's a big cast.
Yeah.
People are very important in the story. Like immediately, and I guess I wonder how helpful that is too with like if they're looking at a Western audience for like, you know, if you're getting Japanese names that are not as familiar, like what's this guy's name I gotta remember again? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like I just know them already, but I wonder how that is for someone that just knows nothing going into it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. I kind of feel like the jumping back and forth through time didn't quite work for me, and maybe that was like part of it that was jarring, is that going into it, I guess, you know, I already had some preconceived notions of like what the story is like from the games, and the TV show is like so vastly different. And I also think too that Kiryu is like, he is a kind of defined character, but I feel like he is defined in the games by his reaction to things.
Yes.
And his drive to just be a decent human being, right? Yeah. And we get two versions of Kiryu in this first episode. We get the kind of shitty, annoying, hot-headed young Kiryu, right? Who like he seems a little selfish, but also selfless. It's kind of confusing, I think, in his arrogance as a young kid who just wants to be the Dragon of Dojima, which I also don't like that there's already another Dragon of Dojima and he's like, I want to be that guy, you know, not like he is the guy or becomes that guy. Like, that's weird. And then we get adult Kiryu, who like just gets that scene from Old Boy or whatever, that Korean movie with like the side-scrolling fight scene. He just gets that whole scene when he gets out of jail, and it's like badass and cool. And he's like, I don't want your car. I like the bus. And then he beats him up. It's like, actually, give me your car. This is Grand Theft Auto now. Like, I don't know. It felt really jarring to me that like there were just different versions of this one character split apart by time, and it just doesn't feel like he's very defined to be like your protagonist in this.
I think that could have worked a lot better if we either had more time with like the calm, collected, the like, this is the guy who's fucking seen some shit. He knows what's up. He's able to easily dispatch 10 other Yakuza guys. Or if we more consistently saw the younger, flipping between the two does give that feeling of two characters as opposed to like, you know, this is growth. Like we're spoilering to you that like this is the growth that he has in this organization.
So I kind of wish they'd almost went with that Yakuza 0 story before, not the Yakuza 1.
Yeah.
Prior to, because like it's already him, like young Kiryu being like, I want to prove myself in the clan and stuff, be a good Yakuza. And that's all it's really about. Like, you do learn some more of his backstory and stuff. It's not really about the origin of Kiryu in a way. There is some of that goes into it. But it really sets up the Yakuza scene a little more. Where everything in the first game is much more serious and organized. In terms of how they approach the like organized bits of it, the Yakuza. I don't know. But yeah, I wish they would have revealed that stuff, because it's like, why should I care about him coming from an orphanage and stuff and being saved by this dude if I don't know anything about him yet?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I also am like, I know that at least in the games, right, Kazama, like the lead of the orphanage, who you find out is a former Yakuza person, is like a very important person to Kiryu. It's kind of like the original reason why Kiryu is such a good person.
Might be like the most important person to Kiryu.
Yes. And I didn't really get much of their relationship in this first episode so far.
It felt different from the games.
Yeah. It felt like a kid who wanted to run away, like a teen who just wanted to, like, I hate you, Dad. Like, yeah.
They definitely play up like the classic like Japanese tropey drama, and that's kind of like my biggest impression of the whole show so far, is that they're trying to get away from it being a video game source, but they still want to make it like this Japanese like B tier drama.
And like,
I guess. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a shot in the dark prediction. I have nothing to base this on, but I just get this vibe from the way the show is being written and what it's being transposed from. Kazama is the dragon of Dojima. I'm just gonna call that shot. I'm gonna just call that right now. Because
Well,
maybe it just seems like the way they would tie this all back around to like
maybe
the father
because
figure.
that's him saying you don't know what you're asking for, you don't know what you mean. That whole just coming full circle moment. Maybe because I was wondering. I guess there's time to explore Kazuma's stuff with Kiryu because like you get little drips of it in the games, but like I don't think we can understate how big of a deal he is to how Kiryu forms his identity. Like, because he gets the world of Yakuza and he's the ideal of like, oh, this is kind of how you can do it honorably and still be a good dude in this, world of crime and terrible people. So hopefully they get to spend more time on that because that is a humongous thing to him.
Yeah.
I mean, and something quite insane about this show is that it's 6 episodes long as well. So you say, I hope they have more time, but you've already watched a sixth of the show.
It's true.
Yeah. So I don't know. I would like to hope it lands. You can probably read our review on site now to see if it does. But
yes, we're recording this well in advance. My review should be live right now. It'll be linked in the description below. But it'll be interesting. Hey, at least we know that this isn't Netflix, so there's a chance for a season 2, and then we can get some more zaniness potentially.
Yeah,
hey, gotta get some Majima action going.
Yeah, Majima's gonna be a big.
How do you handle him in the show? I don't know, because he just in the game he just yells at you like crazy stuff, and you're like, huh? Oh, okay, it's him, and then it just becomes normal after a while. That's why it was so weird to play Yakuza 0, and you're like, who is this guy? He's just a dude. What the fuck?
Can I ask you, Stretch, as someone who doesn't really know that much about the OG games, right? Like, how do you feel about Kiryu, Nishiki, and Yumi, just as characters and the relationship to each other?
Good question.
Just going off the first episode, it's difficult to tell. They really don't spend any time. Well, you see them young, you don't have a chance to see them together older. It kind of gives that like tropiness of like 3 best friends inseparable at youth that have now kind of walked their separate paths that cosmically are going to end up coming back together. I think at the moment they've done a pretty good job of like establishing where each person is when we pick up with the future storyline, as well as kind of their dynamic when they're younger through that like initial heist scene. But like there's really like I can't say much more about that because there's not much there in the first episode, which again is worrying when you know that it's only 6 episodes long. It's like if you've already spent a sixth of the time with not the main characters together, then how will that form over the next 4 hours?
Yeah, I don't know, because that's kind of where I was at too. It's like I don't really get a strong like indication really of their relationship like with each other in this first episode, right? Like especially now as adults. I mean, in the games as well, right? Like they do drift for reasons, right, in the games, but in here it's like this first episode ends with a cliffhanger of like, oh no, did Yumi just die in a four-story car crash? Like what just happened? And I don't care about this version of Yumi. It's like I don't feel like she hasn't been really established as a character. Her relationship to the protagonists don't feel that defined, really, So I already feel very detached from what's going on with these characters we should be following and should be like rooting for or like hoping for.
I think Erren made a really good point earlier that we kind of accidentally skimmed by, is that like it feels like a Yakuza TV show, as in like the capital Y Yakuza. It is a gangster show, but it feels like this is back to those other kind of video game adaptations that we see that are, ashamed of their upbringing. They don't want people. They want to say, "Look at us, we're prestige drama," but they don't want to lean in on what makes the game great. Fallout leaning into how great and wild and wacky the setting was is what made it so great. The Halo TV show shying away from everything that made it, like, it got canceled at the end of season 2, and we only just took a step onto Halo, which is just baffling. That it really feels like, after seeing a few amazing adaptations of video game content, that this feels like we're kind of back in that samey, like, oh, it's video game adaptation.
Yeah, and even on the subject of, like prestige television, I wasn't really getting that vibe from it either. And this is coming from, having watched a lot of other Amazon shows and other video game adaptations recently. It just, I don't know. There's just something about it that kind of feels like they're sort of going through the motions, and it's not like it doesn't feel very story driven like you see in a lot of those prestige shows. And I think that might be like my biggest issue with it.
Yeah, I think that's that messiness of trying to jam pack so much in, particularly this episode 1. I think it's part of it, because like I think if I didn't know anything, I guess I would guess that Kiryu's the main dude, but like I could also see that Nishiki's like the main guy, because he has a lot of stuff that he does in that first episode. That's like, out, like, damn, he's doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they skip around so much. It's kind of, I did feel that it was kind of hard to like really focus on what they were doing. And I think if you don't know anything about the games, you're just going to be really lost.
Yeah, but that made me think though, when we were talking about, like, I wrote an article about what Fallout did so well in The Last of Us show, and that I hoped other game adaptations would do, which this doesn't seem to be doing, unfortunately. But it made me think that I think there is a way to get that wackiness of Yakuza in here that would work in a world. You could craft a world, because I mean, I understand that like this, they're going for some kind of grounded reality here, but you can have that be a warped sense of it in some ways. With Kamurocho itself is like kind of just a wacky place, and is in itself like probably honestly the real main character of the games as much as Kiryu is. But it would fit into that kind of world where it's been portrayed all over the place in all kinds of different media, of how like the ultra rich or these criminal worlds, they're into some weird shit in terms of what they do recreationally. So doing some weird stuff on the side, and that the other people are like, yeah, he's just into that weird thing, would just kind of fit.
Yeah.
So I'd be like, I think there's a world where it could work together, but it doesn't seem like that's what they're trying to do here. No. And in terms of, you're talking about the prestige TV shows, like when I was looking at parts of it, I was like, man, this looks like shot like a soap opera in some way.
Yeah, well, yeah, and like
yeah,
a typical like cheap Japanese drama is.
It felt like that. I was like, huh, this is weird.
Kept coming to my mind like the whole time. I'm like, oh, this seems really kind of low budget for Amazon.
Yeah. I mean, and that's not the worst. I was like, huh, it just feels off to me, because like I said, I was set up with the little intro of him in jail and whatever, and then the like crazy dragon CGI title sequence, and I was like, oh my god, what is going on? And then
they might have spent more money on that than the rest of the show.
And then I see the whiplash of like just the standard camera work and stuff, and I was like, oh, huh, strange.
I will say the one thing that I did notice, that they did actually spend a lot of time making sure the setting was correct. Like you can tell they're in the 1990s during the flashback stuff, and I thought that was at least a good attention to detail.
Yeah.
So I will give them points for that.
Well, in the little shots we saw of Cameron released in this first episode, I was like, oh, that's it.
Yeah, for sure.
It looks like it. Yeah. I think the part in this episode that felt the most like, oh yeah, this is a Yakuza TV show to me, is the scene, the fight scene outside of the prison. that felt the most like, okay, like this dude is untouchable, like brute monster man who can just like headlock two people at once.
That's
That part did
honestly
feel
how
really video gamey.
Yes,
how the show should have started.
I think so
Not
too.
necessarily that scene, but a scene of Kiryu just like nonchalantly doesn't give a shit of beating up some people
Yeah,
and just
and
going about his life.
yeah, and with that scene, that since it felt so close to what a fight in the game would look like, I want to hope that maybe another way they introduce more wacky stuff is like Kiryu suplexing a bike onto someone in Kamurocho, like just any of the heat actions. If it even is like a half of an attempt to do a heat action, I'm down for that. But
Bike grabs a sign,
yeah,
whacks the dude over the head with it.
exactly.
Something.
Like that sort of stuff could be fun.
That could be.
Yeah, and I guess I hope to see more of that, like, because like the fight choreography was pretty cool, and I hope that more of the show, more of the series, like kind of lives up to that. But we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like kind of the common consensus is what we want out of this is for it to be more Yakuza, and at the moment, it's feeling like it's 1 foot in. You know, it's afraid to dive in.
Yeah. But even then, like if it had been like totally like we're just going hard into the drama of it, because it's at its core too. Yakuza, all the Yakuza games it's a pretty good dramatic story. Like if you just take out everything and what's going on, like there's some cool stuff happening. So if they really just leaned into that, it also would have been great. Just the execution even on that is like kind of questionable so far for setting that up properly, to me anyway. Because like I said, it's hard to separate ourselves from it when we know so much about it.
Yeah.
Of where it's going. That's why it's interesting with you, where you don't know the stories. Like, did it even say why Kiryu was in jail in the show?
No,
that's a big why he's there.
I mean, because the episode 1 kind of sets us up as if it's all a mystery, you know, instead of it coming to it as like an action story, it sets it up as a mystery story. That's also where like there's a big issue that I have with the subtitling, because there's a term that the other Yakuza and the other people keep referring to Kiryu as, and I was trying to Google search what that term was, and I couldn't find it. And you know, after a few episodes, I was able to figure out, you know, context clues that it essentially means that, you know, he's been, you know, the equivalent of like a dishonorably discharged. But just to have such an important part of the character, like to call him betrayer, to call him a traitor, to call him a lowlife that you kicked out, that'd be great. But when the subtitle is using a very specific Japanese term that you can't easily Google, then it's like, well, how is a new audience going to approach this? I think what you said, Otten, of like, if you didn't know that Kiryu was the main character, would you believe that Kiryu was the main character? And I'm like, I don't think that I would have.
I said he's definitely a big character, but is he the guy? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, isn't the opening scene of him just shadowboxing?
Yeah.
It's very early on, right?
Yeah.
The jail cell or whatever.
Yeah. So I guess that would at least clue me into like, okay, this is probably the person we're following. Yeah.
True.
Yeah. Maybe.
So as we wrap up this conversation, I'm going to continue watching, and we'll watch the entire season so that I can write my review that you should be able to read right now at techraptor.net, link in the description. But I'd like to pose to the three of you, maybe starting with Erren. Are you going to finish watching this show?
Yeah, I'll give it a watch and see if it reignites my interest in and you know actually getting around to playing the games that I have on my shelf. Maybe if I see how the show ends, I'll be like, oh, you know, maybe the games are actually just that much better. So you know, hopefully it'll be that for me, and if not, it'll just have been something that I'll put on and then I can forget about it. So.
Just like modern TV, am I right?
Right, exactly. I mean, it's only 6 episodes, and they're not even an hour long, so it's not really like a huge time sink, which is nice. So yeah, I mean, you might as well. I've already watched 2 of them, so there's only 4 more for me to go.
Yeah, that's like 3 hours worth of content. That's a afternoon binge.
Yeah. I mean,
The
I
Lord of the
could
Rings movie,
easily
dude.
watch that.
Yeah. It's just an extended. It's just the whole series. It's like one extended edition of Lord of the Rings. Just think of it that way.
Yeah, just watch The Fellowship and you watched it.
Scrappy?
So I'm already like I haven't been on a lot of these TV show breakdown things because I'm just not a TV person. I know it's weird. I don't know. It's weird, but it's just hard for me to get that invested in TV shows nowadays. So I was hoping that this one would hook me in because I love the vibe of Like a Dragon so much, and I'm gonna give it a one or two more episodes to see if that hook sinks, but we will see.
Ooh, maybe I can use Like a Drag as my subtitle in the
Oh,
review.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you haven't watched
Hey,
it all yet.
you haven't finished it yet. Maybe,
Yeah,
yeah.
We'll see.
you never know.
And Otten, will you finish this show?
I don't know. So I'm kind of in Scrappy. I'll give it another couple of episodes probably, but I'm also like, the time for me to watch anything is very slim. There's so many shows that are sitting around that I still need to watch, like Shogun, and I want to watch the Penguin series with Colin Farrell's Penguin on HBO.
Both good.
Penguin's really
I
fucking
haven't
good.
gotten the chance to. So there's so many things that I'm like, if I'm not really loving it, I could be using that time elsewhere.
Actually, quite interestingly, The Penguin is also a show about, a low-level guy in a mob building his way up. There's probably some interesting parallels that you could have there.
Yeah, maybe. Kiryu's like, that's not really his goal as a character. It just.
Yeah.
Anyway, we could talk about Kiryu forever. I could talk about Kiryu all day. One thing that I'm very sad about Kiryu is his voice. No, there's nothing wrong with the actor, but Kiryu's voice is just so iconic to me in the games. It's so perfect. I'm like, oh, I just want that guy. Talk to me forever. It's Kiryu.
You want him to read you bedtime stories.
Yeah. I'll feel safe.
I mean, really, especially for like the upper levels of the voice actors for like the upper levels of the Yakuza and stuff. Like you see them in real life and it's like, oh shit, that's just Yakuza. They could have brought all them in and just let them play their characters.
Why not?
Yeah.
They're
Especially,
probably
like,
too expensive.
Yeah. Money.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I guess to me, like the final thought I have is it's like, if this doesn't land, like if the whole season doesn't quite land, at least there are 8+ Yakuza games out there, all with like pretty good cutscene direction, and like those feel like TV shows in a way. So like,
Definitely.
there's that treasure trove to explore, Erren.
Yes.
Yeah, like I said, I need to get to them. It's just they're all really long games, and
Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah, they're pretty.
it's very daunting to think about.
No, for sure. It's just that you have them also all on your shelf, so it's like right there.
Yeah, I mean, at least I have them. I mean, that's important. That's like the first step, right?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time and sitting down and chatting with me about Yakuza Episode 1. For those listening, go check out our review and give the show a watch. As we've said, I guess like the highest praise that we've come out of this with is that it's short.
That's exciting. Hell yeah. I would say it's worth watching for the fight scene. That fight scene's badass. It's cool.
Yeah, that fight scene at the end of Episode 1 is pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in. Catch us some other time.
Bye-bye.